Among the truest things that can happen to people is to have the blindfold removed, not so that you can see what a terrible person you've always been, but quite the opposite. You discover that you're worthy of admiration, and you never knew that to be true.
You describe mysticism as not something that has to do with escapism, but you call it dive right in-ism, dive right in-ism. So for people who consider themselves emerging mystics, what's your dive right in-ism piece of wise counsel, if you will?
Well, I think it's noticing, so much escapes our notice. And so if you notice the notice of God, you're noticing as God does, attentive to everything. You're aware of human beings who are in your proximity. So there's a kind of an attention. It's the discipline of alertness, where you're alert to people. And again, it's part of a practice, but it's also a decision to be alert. You really kind of, you don't once and for all decide to be that, but with every breath you take, you're being alert to who's here. And it's really hard here because there's so many people here, and it's like, and people are walking past.
No, it's a little bit like we're in Grand Central
Oh my-
Station. I mean, there's a
oh my
line
God,
of people
yeah.
outside your door right now looking
Exactly.
in, wanting
Yeah.
your attention, actually.
Yeah. But it's constantly like, the guy on the Ed Sullivan Show, we're dating ourselves here, but where you spin the plates.
Yeah.
And the plate is wobbling, and you're endlessly spinning the plates around here, which is hard, and you don't want a plate to wobble or to hit the floor worse. But again, you can only do what you can do, and you try to do it with as pure a loving heart as you can hope for.
You are a masterful storyteller, and there's a way in the stories that you tell, it communicates so much. And I wonder if you can share with us the first thing that comes to mind for you when you think of a story of redemption, a story here that you've witnessed at Homeboy, and you would say, that to me is a true story of redemption.
Yeah, yeah. So Danny was a kid who was a, gang member who, little knucklehead. I would see him in the projects. He always had a gun tucked into the front of his pants, and he was always said he would never step foot in this place,
Mm-hmm.
So in recovery, they say it takes what it takes. It can be the birth of a son, the death of a friend, a long stretch in prison. For Danny, he was in prison only for 2 years. He went in at 18, he came out at 20. It takes what it takes. For him, it was his mother had pancreatic cancer. So suddenly I watched him, very tenderly take care of his mother. He was the primary hospice caregiver. A large family. And yet, odd that he would be the one, because this kid was really quite tortured by this woman that he was caring for. So, and I went over there and I anointed her, and he had asked me to come but just to observe that. And then, she died. And a week later, I buried her. And then a week after that, he walks in here for the first time. And I watched him from this perch, from my office. I watched him, work side by side with guys he used to shoot at. I watched him laugh. I watched him, sweep and clean this place, and he kind of became, the truth of who he was. And, He got his GED, and he started to do all these things, And then he came in here to this office, and he said, what happened to me yesterday has never happened to me before. Right across the street is the Gold Line and the train. And so he got on it at the end of the workday to take it east to go home. He said it was a packed train, and but he was able to get a seat. And he said hanging to a pole just in front of him, he says, was a guy who was medio pedo, which means he was a little bit drunk. He said he was a gang member because I could see tattoos on his hand. Older guy, I didn't know who he was, he said. And Danny was wearing a sweatshirt that said, Homeboy Industries, jobs, not jails, filled his whole chest. And the guy who was a little bit drunk says, you work there? And Danny doesn't know whether to engage him really, but he nods, he says, yes. And the guy said, is it any good? And Danny says, well, it's helped me. In fact, I don't think I'll ever go back to prison because of this place. And then Danny stands and he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out a pen and a little piece of paper. And he proceeds to write the address of Homeboy Industries on this little piece of paper. And he's telling me this story and he says, I couldn't believe I knew the address by heart, he says. Then he gives it to the guy and he says, come and see us. We'll help you. And the guy studies the piece of paper and he says, thank you. And the train stops and the guy gets off and Danny sits down. Then he returns to that earlier refrain where he says, what happened to me next has never happened to me in my life. And he starts to get emotional. He says, everybody on the train was staring at me. Everyone on the train was nodding at me. Everyone on the train was smiling at me. And now he can't speak. And when he can speak, he says, and for the first time in my life, I felt admired. And I remember this so well because the two of us, we sat here and we just cried. There was nothing to say about it except that. The soul feeling its worth in somebody inhabiting the fact that they're admirable, that they're filled with dignity, that they're noble. Somebody kind of seeing, oh, nobly born, remember who you really are. Somebody remembering who they really happen to be. Quite apart from the torturous stuff that actually happened to this kid. He was able to find that, And you're humbled by that, because it's so pure and it's you can be confident in it as among the truest things that can happen to people is to have the blindfold removed, not so that you can see what a terrible person you've always been, but quite the opposite. You discover that you're worthy of admiration, and you never knew that to be true.
Thank you, Father G.
Discover on-demand videos and docuseries, explore a full schedule of daily life classes, and become part of an incredible community. At Sounds True One, we invite you inward to find your way, your way.